Yeah, I think there are a couple stories within this here. You start with the core Democratic strength, which is this immediate Atlanta metro area here. And this is where Warnock, remember he finished first. He didn't get over 50%, but he finished first in the preliminary. And this is the area that powered him in the preliminary. We're almost all in Fulton County right now. But I mean, Warnock is sitting at 76.5%. Just compare that to how he ran in Fulton County. This is Atlanta. This is the biggest in the state. Back in November, he got 73.5% Fulton County then. This was a great number for Warnock in November, and he improves on it tonight. We'll still, again, a few more votes to come in Fulton County. We expect they'll be Warnock friendly. They may not be quite at 76.5%, but he'll finish, it looks like, above where he finished in November, a few points above where he finished in November. This was a huge one for him. Gwinnett County, big, one of the fastest growing counties in the state, again, right outside Atlanta. He finished just under 59% in November. Tonight, he's just over 62%. This was a great number for Warnock back in November. This was an even better number for him tonight. So in these core Democratic areas, he didn't just hit the numbers he needed, he exceeded them. So that was one problem for Walker right away. He needed Warnock to underperform the core Atlanta metro area. That didn't happen. The other thing that Walker was counting on was, again, if you look back at that November general election, in Georgia, if you took the Senate race out of it, it was a good night for Republicans in Georgia back in November. Brian Kemp got reelected. Brad Raffensperger got reelected. They won statewide elections. The one who was lagging behind all the other Republicans was Herschel Walker. So that was the other question, these big Republican vote-producing counties. We talked all night about Cherokee County. This is the biggest Republican vote-producing county in the state. And you could see Walker wins it. He doesn't do that much better than he did in November, and this is what Kemp, meanwhile, back in November, this is what Kemp was getting out of Cherokee County. He was getting over 74% of the vote. Walker still couldn't even get, he barely got to 69% tonight. He needed to be in the 70s in Cherokee County. He needed bigger numbers in the big Republican counties that are just outside the Atlanta metro area. So that left, he had some good numbers in the rural areas, but the bottom line is, in the big Republican counties, he didn't improve enough, and in the core Democratic areas, he didn't contain Warnock's strength, and Warnock wins the race.
Not enough offense and not enough defense. I think we can go live right now to Herschel Walker's campaign headquarters, where he is speaking. Oh, he's just wrapping up. Did Mr. Walker concede? Can we go live to this right now? He looks confused. Herschel Walker just gave remarks to his supporters in which he did not formally concede, but he said conciliatory words. He talked about having fought a good fight, which implies that the fight is over. So concession and conciliation, I'm parsing, but that's I'll take it. It's positive.
The other big, quiet winner tonight is a president of the United States who becomes the first one since 1934. Since Franklin Roosevelt, to not lose a single senator of his own party in the first midterm election. There are so many astounding comparisons that you can make between Joe Biden and other presidents, but you have to reach very far back. You have to go back to Franklin Roosevelt. And no one has been more underestimated as a presidential candidate going into the presidency, what governing he'd be capable of with a 50-50 Senate all along, and how obviously he was going to lose the Senate in his first midterm, and he held on to it.
What about the other quiet winner? Sanity. America showed us again they weren't going to vote for crazy. Herschel Walker was a wholly unqualified, out-of-the-box candidate, and America said, or Georgia said, no, thank you. The question is the GOP watching and listening? Because if you look at the House, it doesn't appear that way.
Well, I mean, that said, the House, in any normal political science model, should have swung 30, 40, 60 seats to the House, to the Republicans. Yes. And Kevin McCarthy, maybe, is going to be taking over as House Speaker if he can cobble together the votes.
And he'll be flanked by whom?
With a majority that you can fit in one hand. I mean, that itself is almost as ahistorical a result as the Senate result that you're talking about right now. And the combination of those two things tells you that it's not any one race and it's not any one crazy candidate. It's Joe Biden leading this Democratic Party in a way that is not, honestly, not have electoral success like this since FDR.
Well, I mean, and the thing that Joe Biden always had is he is the arithmetic mean of normal. right? He's just normal, average,
Joe.
moderate guy.
Joe.
And it turns out that is a very popular model because remember, Barack Hussein Obama, put the name aside, what was he? Arithmetic mean, normal guy, right? He gives you cuckoo. And I think that at the end of the day, again, we've talked about this a lot tonight, the Republican strategy has always been theatrics, really since Ronald Reagan. It's been give you theatrical character, give you former actor. I think we've said it before. They nominated Goober. Goober was a United States congressperson. They nominated the guy from the Love Boat, right? Like they keep looking for ever more theatrical celebrities. That model works temporarily, but at a certain point, people do get exhausted, and they actually do like policy. And Biden has proved that policy actually works as a strategy.
And the other thing you're seeing in Biden is someone who I think has done this better than anyone I've ever seen, which is he's using his experience wisely. You know, experience can sometimes be a weight when you move up to the next level in politics and in governing, and you don't quite know how to use it. He has used it so wisely. When you look at previous presidents who have anything comparable to his experience, you have to look at Lyndon Johnson, who was Majority Leader of the Senate and then was Vice President. Lyndon Johnson wrecked his presidency, just wrecked it. He could not use his experience to make it work. Joe Biden has been so wise in the use of his own experience.
I believe this is an election where no incumbent lost their primary or general election bid, which is an important distinction.
Whoa, no, there were
in the Senate.
In the Senate,
Sorry.
In the House,
just in the Senate.
There was a number who decided I have to go home.
Oh, sure.
Gave up. Waved the white flag.
We are awaiting the victory speech from incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock, who has been reelected tonight in the state of Georgia. While we are awaiting his victory speech, we're going to bring back into the conversation Congresswoman Nikema Williams, who chairs the Democratic Party of the great state of Georgia, which is having a moment right now. Congresswoman, thank you so much and congratulations.
Your expression right
now, you are lighting homes across America with the expression on your face right now. I do have to tell you, I have to give you a warning. If Senator Warnock starts speaking, we're going to jump in, and I apologize in advance if I need to interrupt you. But please.
That's okay, Rachel. I want to hear him too.
Put into words how you are feeling and what you attribute this victory to tonight.
Rachel, I think earlier tonight when I was on, I told you that the Fighting Fifth was going to show up, but we organized in every corner of every county and never took any vote for granted. We knew that this would come down to the wire. We knew that every vote would count, and that's why we kept working until the polls closed today. Actually, until 7:20, because one polling location in my district stayed open until 7:20 p.m., and we never stopped organizing. So this victory is for democracy. It's for the voters of Georgia who have been the center of the political universe cycle after cycle. I think someone said earlier this didn't just happen in 2020. I've been an organizer on the ground in Georgia for over a decade now, and we've been gaining cycle after cycle, even in the state legislative seats. We picked up seats in the House and the Senate this cycle. So we are putting in the work and delivering for everyday Georgians with the work that we're doing at the Democratic Party of Georgia. I am proud to be the chairwoman. We have partners in this work, all of our independent groups. My husband, shout out to my hubby, Leslie Small with America Votes, who has been organizing independent partners. And I mean, it's been a collective. We built multiracial coalitions because it takes all of us to win for the people.
Tell me, I mean, what's your secret? What's the secret sauce in the Georgia Democratic Party? I mean, right now, you're firing on all cylinders, and you are not always on the most favorable terrain. But as you say, going back election cycle after election cycle now over this past decade, Democrats in Georgia have been showing the rest of the country how to do it and have been winning improbable races and making things that once seemed impossible now seem likely. And I think there's a lot of Democratic parties around the country, different state parties, who really wish they had some of that secret sauce that you all have in Georgia and that you've been able to apply to, again, not always favorable terrain in your state. Is there something that you're doing that other state parties aren't doing that they could learn from you?
I mean, it's building those multiracial coalitions, Rachel. and the year-round organizing cannot be overstated. We have to stay out there and meet voters where they are every single day, and that's what we're doing at the Democratic Party of Georgia. I am proud to be the chairwoman. I'm the first Black woman to chair the state party, and I am so proud of the work that we've done. And I think my senator, did he just come out on the stage?
Oh, everybody's getting there. We can tell. We've got eyes on it. Don't worry. We won't mess
My
it.
senator, my constituent. I'm excited tonight, Rachel.
Let me ask you one other question just from Punditland. I feel like some of the way that we talk about this, and I include myself in this, and it's reductive and wrong, but some of the ways that we talk about this is about the strategic decision to try to energize the base, feed the base, serve the base, turn out the base, organize the base, versus appealing to swing voters, appealing to defectors from the other party, appealing to independents who might otherwise be sort of not necessarily motivated to turn out for an election like this. And I say we're being reductive in that because I think we often present it as an either or. It now looks like the way that Senator Warnock won this re-election was by doing both and almost in equal measure. Is that fair?
You are absolutely right. We don't have the luxury to pick and choose voters. We meet people where they are, and that includes the urban dwellers in Atlanta, the moderates in what I like to call the pearl necklace surrounding Atlanta, rural farmers. I grew up on a farm in rural Alabama, Rachel. So we meet people where they are.
Nikema Williams, the chair of the Democratic Party of Georgia. I told you we would have to say goodbye when your senator walked out onto the stage, and here he is. Congresswoman Williams, congratulations tonight. And tonight, America, you are looking at the newly reelected Democratic U.S. Senator from the state of Georgia, the Reverend Raphael Warnock. Let's hear what he has to say.
Wow! Well, hello, everybody. Y'all settle down now. Settle down. Thank you, Georgia. Thank you. I love you too. All right, y'all settle down. I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, and to God be the glory. For the great things that God has done. And after a hard-fought campaign, or should I say campaigns, it is my honor to utter the four most powerful words ever spoken in a democracy. The people have spoken. often say that a vote is a kind of prayer for the world we desire for ourselves and for our children. Voting is faith put into action. And Georgia, you have been praying with your lips and your legs. With your hands and your feet, your heads and your hearts. You have put in the hard work, and here we are standing together. I want to say thank you. And I want to say thank you to my mother, who is here tonight. You'll see her in a little while. But she grew up in the 1950s in Waycross, Georgia, picking somebody else's cotton and somebody else's tobacco. But tonight, she helped pick her youngest son to be a United States Senator. My dad has long passed into the light, but he is still very much with us. I watched my dad, a pastor and a small businessman, take care of his family by working really hard with his hands and using his brain. And he picked up old junk cars and loaded them on the back of a rig that the mechanisms of which he designed himself, one on top of the other. And that's how he took care of his family. But on Sunday morning, the man who lifted broken cars lifted broken people. And convinced them of their value. I would not be here were it not for them. I am a proud son of Savannah, Georgia. A coastal city known for its verdant town squares and its cobblestone streets. Tall, majestic oak trees, dripping with Spanish moss, bend and beckon the love of history and horticulture to this city by the sea. My roots, like the roots of those oak trees, go deep down into the soil of Savannah and Waycross and Scriven County and Burke County. I am Georgia. I am an example and an iteration of its history, of its pain and its promise, of the brutality and the possibility. But because this is America, and because we always have a path to make our country greater against unspeakable odds, here we stand together. Thank you, Georgia. I want to my mother and my late father. I want to thank my siblings who are here. I'm one of 12 in my family. Clearly, my folks read the Bible, be fruitful and multiply. Our family was short on money, but long on love, long on faith. And I want to thank my two darling children. Chloe and Caleb, whose brilliance and whose eyes inspired me to work for all of our children. Georgia, I don't want you to miss what you've done. In a moment in which there were folk trying to divide our country, and those forces are very much at work right now, Georgia did an amazing thing. In 2021, it sent its first African-American senator and its first Jewish senator to the United States Senate in one fell swoop. And you have done it again. Thank you, Georgia. Now, there are those who will look at the outcome of this race and say that, yes, you're right, we won. But there are those who would look at the outcome of this race and say that there's no voter suppression in Georgia. Let me be clear. Just because people endured long lines that wrapped around buildings, some blocks long, just because they endured the rain and the cold and all kinds of tricks in order to vote, doesn't mean that voter suppression does not exist. It simply means that you, the people, have decided that your voices will not be silenced. Let us not forget that when we entered this runoff, a vestige of the ugly side of our complicated American story, state officials said that we couldn't vote on Saturday. But we sued them and we won. And the people once again rose up in a multiracial, multi-religious coalition of conscience. You endured the rain, you endured the long lines, and you voted, and you did it because you believe, as I do, that democracy is the political enactment of a spiritual idea. This notion that each of us has within us a spark of the divine, that we were created in the imago Dei, in the image of God. And if you're not given to that kind of religious language, that's fine. Our tent is big. Simply put it this way, each of us has value. And if we have value, we ought to have a voice. And the way to have a voice is to have a vote to determine the direction of your country and your destiny within it. And so we stand here tonight on broad shoulders. Our ballot is a bloodstained ballot. We stand here on the shoulders of the martyrs, Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, two Jews and an African American who lost their lives fighting for that great American right to vote. Viola Luiso and James Reed, white sister and a white brother who also lost their lives. Fannie Lou Hamer, that indomitable Mississippi sharecropper. And my parishioner, God bless his memory, John Lewis, who one day crossed the bridge knowing that there was danger on the other side, and yet he crossed that bridge while building a bridge for the future. And now it is on us, the latest generation of Americans and of Georgians, to keep building that bridge, to keep walking that long walk, pushing the nation towards our ideals. And so, Georgia, this is my promise to you. The work that we must do is difficult. The issues are not simple, they're complex. But here's my promise to you: I will walk with you even as I work for you. Because here is what I've learned as a pastor. You can't lead the people unless you love the people. You can't love the people unless you know the people, and you can't know the people unless you walk among the people. You cannot serve me if you cannot see me. And so during these difficult days, even as I work on specific public policy proposals and I offer bills and work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to get those bills passed, I just want you to know that I see you. I see you parents as you're trying to put your kids through college and through community college and technical college. I see you students as you're trying to make a way out of no way. I see you essential workers fighting for a livable wage to participate in the prosperity that you create for others. Farmers who are an answer to our most basic prayer: give us this day our daily bread, and yet they struggle to hold on to the farm. Farmers, I see you, and I'm here with you. And together we can work through all of these issues. And I want all of Georgia to know whether you voted for me or not. I get it. But I want all of Georgia to know, whether you voted for me or not, that every single day I am going to keep working for you. I'm proud of the bipartisan work I've done, and I intend to do more, because I actually believe that at the end of the day, we are all Americans. I believe in that American covenant. E pluribus unum. And it is that covenant that drives me to work to lower costs, to lower the cost of prescription drugs, to create jobs all across our state, to address the issue of criminal justice reform. Because I believe that you can have justice and safety at the same time. So thank you for this high honor. After a hard-fought campaign, you got me for 6 more years. So let me quickly do a couple of things. I want to thank my amazing campaign staff. Led by Quentin Folks. I want to thank my amazing Senate team led by Mark Libel and my state team led by Meredith Lilly. I want to thank Lawrence Bell, who had a crazy idea that I should run for the Senate. I laughed, and here we are. And I want to thank the amazing people of Ebenezer Baptist Church who, amidst the attacks, stuck with your pastor. Thank you, Ebenezer Church. So let's celebrate for a little while on this mountain. Let's dance because we deserve it. But tomorrow we go back down into the valley to do the work. I know that the days are still difficult. The times are dark, but the light, the scripture says, shines in the darkness, and the darkness overcometh it not. I'm ready to keep doing this work. I can hear my dad of blessed memory say, get up, get dressed, put your shoes on, get ready. Are you ready, Georgia? I'm ready. Stand up for workers, to stand up for women, to stand up for our children. I'm ready to build a stronger Georgia. God bless you. Keep the faith and keep looking up.
Making the case implicitly for the election of more pastors as politicians, at least those who can speak as eloquently as the pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Senator Raphael Warnock, the first African-American elected to a full U.S. term, a full term in the United States Senate from the great state of Georgia, talking about a vote as a prayer for the world we desire for ourselves and our children. Talked about his mother, who picked cotton, who picked other people's tobacco, and who today helped pick her son for the United States Senate. What a room.
Yeah. And when you elect a pastor, you're going to get a sermon.
Oof. Every time he talks.
You're going to get a sermon. I mean, this is one of the reasons that Raphael Warnock really is one of the great political stars of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
First of all, winning in what is still a red state, winning, against the, I guess the Kemp machine, because that's really what was running the other side of that race. Winning a second time. Oh, there's his mom.
Yeah.
There's his mom. He featured her in some of his ads. But if you elect a pastor, Sky Daddy's gonna get a shout out. You're gonna get a little God, a little Jesus is gonna be in there. But I think he also speaks to a kind of fundamental moderation that the Democratic Party has become very good at modeling. Whether the candidate is white or black, you're gonna get, whether it's Shapiro or whether it's him or whether it's the governor of Michigan, Big Gretchen Whitmer, you get a fundamental moderation with Democrats. And the big risk for Republicans is that they've let go of moderation. So that means that independent voters, including college-educated white voters, the temptation now is that you can take the risk. Lindsey Graham, I think, is one of the biggest losers tonight, right? There was the Daily Show put out a tweet saying that he called to concede on behalf of Herschel Walker, that he called Raphael Warnock. The idea that the only way to appeal to white voters is with wild theatrics that appeal to their fears about race and religion, I think it is a problem long term, because fundamental moderation is actually a really sound political strategy.
Yeah.
And Democrats have figured that
To
out.
that point of him as a star in the Democratic Party right now, let's also just think about the practical consequences of the fact that he has had to run for office 4 times in 2 years. And he has, you heard the crowd saying 6 more years, 6 more years. Yeah. One of the things that he can now do is that he's going to have 6 years in which he can just be a senator.
That was the first speech he got to give to an audience, both in the room and nationally, without impending election hanging over him.
And now he heads to the United States Senate, where we expect that he will be a national figure in the Republican Party firmament.
And listen, even though he had to run 17 times in 3 months or whatever the actual math was, made his mark in the last 2 years. You know, became the face of the voting rights legislation, was very involved in some of the key priorities for the Biden administration. He mentioned working across the aisle with Republicans in this speech, but also said repeatedly, I see you.
Yeah.
I see you, struggling parents. I see you, students. I see you, essential workers. And with Warnock, you get the sense that it's not just rhetoric. This is the foundation of his candidacy is to help people.
Yeah.
And the American covenant.
But he's
the
also
thing that illuminates.
coming from a strong place, and that besides people who are struggling, the state of Georgia right now, comparatively speaking, is doing quite well. And he's in office. The economy, they're back to better jobs numbers than they had before the pandemic. It's becoming an electric vehicle hub. Gas is now under $3 in Georgia. So a lot of people in Georgia are doing quite well. So that argument from the Republican Party, Democrats are handing you such a horrible hand and you're suffering, they're not. What they want is something better. And he spoke tonight about delivering that.
But he also, I mean, Georgia also has a lot of hospitals closing. They have a lot of fundamental economic issues.
Yes.
And at this point, moderate issues include health care. It includes making sure that people can actually go to the doctor. He's done a lot of legislative work in that area. And I think that, you know, we have to expand kind of the vision of what kind of moderate politics looks like. It looks a lot more progressive now because people have real economic needs in place.
Lawrence, can you talk a little bit about his prospects in the Senate? Now, not talking about electoral prospects, but his prospects as a senator. I mean, obviously, one byproduct of the Georgia runoff system, despite its troubling origins, is that a senator who wins a runoff in Georgia has the spotlight to himself. There aren't other senators who, when they win their election, get a whole night dedicated to it like this. You combine that with his fundamental competence and his brilliance as an orator, the fact that he's a young man, the fact that he does have the entire Democratic Party across the country pulling for him, and he's an incredibly recognizable figure. What does that portend for this term for him in the Senate?
He just changed the lives of 50 Democratic senators. They are now part of a real majority, and for the first time, they are actually part of committee majorities, which is going to change their lives dramatically. The chairs of those committees are all indebted to him because they now will have a majority of one on their committee where they had even numbers of both parties on the committees. It changes the way those committees work in profound ways. And they all, all 50 of these Democratic senators, everyone in the Senate is watching this tonight. Republicans, every one of them, they heard every word of that. Lindsey Graham listened to every word of that. But the Democrats, listening to every word of that, know that they have not just a new star, but they have someone to whom they are all incredibly grateful for giving them this real majority for the first time that many of them will experience. Many of them have never been in this kind of majority before.
Let's test that live, because the Senate will be a 51-49 split with the Democrats in the majority, and one of those senators, Amy Klobuchar, Democratic senator from Minnesota, the chair of the Democratic Steering Committee, joins us live now. She's been watching these results along with all of us. She just saw Senator Warnock's speech. Senator Klobuchar, congratulations to you and your colleagues. As Lawrence puts it, we expect your lives will be a little bit easier in the Senate with Senator Warnock back among you.
Well, for sure, Lawrence right about the practicality of this. Our lives are easier. But for me, this night was just a celebration. I was so happy. And Jory's point about when you got a preacher, you're going to get a sermon, it just gave me goosebumps as he used that moment on the national stage, as he's done time and time again in the Senate, not mincing words and focusing on things like freedom to vote and making sure people understood, yeah, he won, but he just didn't talk about, hey, great, I won. He went back and talked about there was voter suppression here. People couldn't vote on Saturdays. We fought it, and he pledged to go forward and fight for voting rights. I've sat in rooms with him when there's no media, when there's no stage, when there's no glowing audience in front of him, and he did the same thing. So here in the Valley, as you know, he ended his speech saying that we must go back to the Valley to work. Here I am. We're very excited to have Raphael back, and I just can tell you that every senator loves the guy. And yes, this is about big issues and reducing drug prices and fighting for health care, having people's back. And yes, Senator Schumer and our team, it was an incredible team effort. But in the end, there's one guy on that stage giving us that sermon and leading us through this night to the light. So we couldn't be happier for Raphael tonight.
It's great to have that insight from you in terms of what he's just like as a colleague. We've all seen him as an interview subject and as a campaigner, but as a senator, he has had to fight. He has had to go back to the voters again and again and again and again in the 2 years that he has been in the Senate. But now he'll be settling into a 6-year term, and I wonder. Looking at Georgia, thinking about your own state, thinking about other purple to red to blue swing states around the country, if there's a lesson in the way that he has campaigned too. Obviously, you know, Georgia Democrats didn't all win statewide in these midterm elections, but he managed to.
He did,
and some of that is about Herschel Walker, but some of that's about him.
It is, and you know, the work that Nikema, that Stacey Abrams have done with him, with John Ossoff in building the party there, reaching out, bringing in new voters, bringing in, of course, African-American voters, Hispanic voters, Asian American voters, is incredible. But also, as you talked about, reaching out to the independents and moderates. But I think the other lesson here is, you know, the shadow of Donald Trump, it was looming over the midterms, looming over this election. It was only this last week where he said he wanted to terminate parts of the Constitution. Well, it is Georgian voters, Democrats, independents, moderate Republicans, who stood up 2 years ago, stunned the nation when, as Raphael said, they elected their first African-American senator, first Jewish senator, and basically defeated 2 incumbent Republicans. Who would have thought that would have flipped the Senate? They did that. And a lot of this was Georgians saying, we believe in democracy. And you saw that repeatedly, where over 30% of people that voted Democratic in this election said they did it in large part because of our democracy. I don't want us to forget that and how important it is. That's why Raphael talked about voting, but also freedom of women to make their own health care decisions, reproductive choice. That was also on the ballot throughout the midterms. So all of this, I hope our Republican colleagues, as you said, were watching, and instead of trying to cut down the number of voters, that they change their policy and they change their candidates, because what we saw here once again was an incredible candidate that rose to the occasion and won.
Senator Amy Klobuchar from the great state of Minnesota. Senator, thank you for being here with us as we are reacting to this speech and these results tonight. It's great to see you.
Great to be on. Thanks, Rachel.
All right. We got much more as we come back, as NBC News projects that Democratic incumbent U.S. Senator Raphael Warnock has won re-election in Georgia tonight. Much more ahead. Stay with us. I mentioned earlier that the losing candidate in tonight's U.S. Senate race in Georgia, Republican Herschel Walker, made remarks to the crowd at his headquarters tonight that were not technically a concession, but they were conciliatory words. I want to play for you some of what Mr. Walker had to say here.
I want to thank all of you as well, because we've had a tough journey, have we not? But one of the things I said is when they called the race, I said the numbers doesn't look like they're going to add up. But one of the things I want to tell all of you is you never stop dreaming. I don't want any of you to stop dreaming. I don't want any of you to stop believing in America. I want you to believe in America and continue to believe in the Constitution and believe in our elected officials most of all.
Believe in the Constitution and believe in our elected officials most of all. My colleague Chris Hayes is standing by with our team of political insiders. Chris.
All right, thanks, Rachel. I'm here back again with Jen Psaki, Simone Sanders-Townsend, and Michael Steele. Well, I suppose that could have been worse, Simone.
I thought it was, you know what? I thought that was good. He said, believe in the Constitution, kind of maybe a jab at Donald Trump, who essentially said he wanted to tear it up or have someone invalidate it. Believe in your elected officials. There are people across the country who have lost faith in the system.
He also said the numbers don't add up, which is crucially like not the big lie.
It's another way of
yes,
saying we did not win. And then he shifted to, but let's still be dreaming. I don't know what that means for his future, but yeah, he sort of conceded.
No, he did. He struck a tone, and it's a tone different from what we've heard from Republicans who've lost races. We still have Carrie Lake, who's challenging right now in a race that's been certified, for heaven's sake.
Yes. Although we have to say, Herschel Walker, with that, again, as Rachel characterized, a conciliatory, if not outright concession speech, essentially concession, joins the ranks of a bunch of Republicans who have all essentially done the same. Carrie Lake now stands on an island, well, with her and Donald Trump, the two of them on the island of Mar-a-Lago, like physically.
She wants that vice presidential nod hard. So.
Just final quickly tonight, it just struck me tonight, you know, we talk about diversity and diversity our strength, and a multiracial coalition, just watching Raphael Warnock, thinking about the prophetic tradition of the black church, which is one of the great contributions of America to all of human culture, right? One of the outstanding contributions of this nation to human civilization, the prophetic tradition of the black church, seeing that there, and seeing about how complicated the coalition, the Democratic Party, has to keep going to eke out these 2-point wins. You know, what an accomplishment it is, frankly.
Yeah.
To get all that to work, right? To get all the oars in the water in the same direction, like it has now 4 times in a row in these races.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think what they did really well is they continued to evolve. There's no question that the Warnock campaign finished the general election. They had an actual meeting and they said, where didn't we do well?
Right.
Where can we do better? That's why they ran all those ads targeted at different Asian American communities where there was a decrease in vote from 2021. And you have to continue to meet voters where they are and try to reach them in a variety of ways. And they did that very well.
And there has to be, to Jen's point, an infrastructure to support what the campaign decisions are outside infrastructure. And that is the work of, I go back to Stacey Abrams. You know, she was not successful in her bid for governor this time around, but the work that she did to invest in that state, to demonstrate that Georgia is a viable competitor. Going back a decade is the reason that Raphael Warnock will now serve 6 years as senator.
I want to say the Republican Party $1 million. Okay, this is what you need to do. No autopsy. Quality candidates. Go back to what we did in 2010 and before. Absentee ballots, vote by mail.
Yes.
Right.
Giving up the early vote thing is one of the craziest strategic blunders of the party.
Voting 101, people. Voting 101. This is not a complicated process. Have a message, have candidates, and put those to work on behalf of the party, and you can be successful.
The last point that I would make here, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, Michael, I think it would be better if American politics were less racially polarized and if both parties were essentially multiracial coalitions that had to deal with the complexity and the dynamism that makes up pluralistic multiracial politics. This, you know, Herschel Walker was this strange sort of like symbolic. And this year, the recruiting class had more candidates of color than ever I had seen in a long time for the Republican Party. But the deep work there at the coalitional level is still not happening.
The deep work is, we did the deep work in 2010. Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, Susana Martinez. We had the work. They undid the work. So the reality right now for this party is you have good qualities. You have that diversity within the party. Elevate it. You elected John James to Congress of Michigan. Very strong, fine, military guy, strong businessman, family man. You have the packages. Just let them rise. Let that cream rise and get rid of the sour milk that is Trump and the affection that he brings to the party.
Jen Psaki, Simone Sanders-Townsend, Michael Steele. As always, good to be at the Insider's Table. I feel better about myself.
We'll welcome you back anytime.
I feel like more like an insider.
You're welcome.
We're going to have lunch.
Rachel, back to you, the outsiders, I suppose.
Yes, exactly. We prefer to think of ourselves as the liminal figures. Sort of neither here nor there, not helping or hurting. We're just on the edge, always. Listen, I mean, I want to go back just to one practical point. We've got just about 90 seconds here before we need to take a break. But in terms of what happens next here, I think that you guys were right earlier to say what happens next here is judges. right?
Yeah.
That the Democratic Party right now has free room to maneuver in terms of confirming Democratic nominees, Joe Biden's nominees, to the federal bench. And there's no reason, if the Republican-controlled House isn't going to sign on to constructive legislation for Joe Biden to sign, which I don't think anybody's expecting, I mean, we should expect them to be sprinting on judges now, should we not?
Well, he's already set a record, and
Yeah.
now he's going to go even faster. And we've seen in all of this Trump litigation the importance of this, in addition to the Supreme Court rulings this year, more than we've ever seen it before. Republicans, ever since Roe versus Wade, have been obsessive about the courts and about federal judge appointments. This is the year, it seems to me, that Democratic voters finally got it.
Yeah.
And they've got a former chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee as president of the United States, and he has been ramming them through.
Yeah.
A historic night as Georgia elects Senator Raphael Warnock to a full term in the United States Senate, the first African-American elected to a full term in the United States Senate from Georgia. It gives Democrats a clear 51-seat majority in the United States Senate. Still a lot to unpack, and our coverage continues right after this. Stay with us.
Good evening once again. I'm Stephanie Rule. It is midnight on the East Coast and 9 p.m. out west. And the final election of the 2022 midterms has officially been decided. Senator Raphael Warnock is keeping his seat. NBC News projects he has won the Georgia runoff, defeating Republican challenger Herschel Walker. Warnock will be Georgia's first black senator to serve a full 6-year term in the Senate.
It is my honor to utter the 4 most powerful words ever spoken in a democracy. The people have spoken.
The race, however, was extremely close, with Warnock and Walker swapping leads all night long. Democrats will now have a clear majority in the Senate with 51 seats. Let's bring back in tonight Jason Johnson, a politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University and an MSNBC political contributor. He joins us live from Warnock's campaign party. Jason, you have been there all night talking about the enthusiasm, the excitement. They got to be happier than ever right now.
Oh, yeah, Stephanie, the real party is just starting now. People are breaking out, going upstairs, going downstairs, cheering. I got to tell you, Stephanie, this was a national election. So you had people, while the results were coming in, texting their friends in California and Michigan and Pennsylvania and telling them what's happening on the ground. You've had celebrities, a lot of African-American celebrities showing up because they wanted to be a part of tonight's celebration. It is going to be a party throughout the city of Atlanta for the next day and a half. Don't be fooled. Raphael Warnock said tomorrow we go back to work, but the city of Atlanta is going to be doing a different kind of work tonight.
What do people there think got Warnock over the finish line? Again, it's extraordinary that he won, but it was very close.
Well, Stephanie, here's the thing. It wasn't that close. Georgia is only recently a purple state, and there is an advantage for a lot of Republicans. So it wasn't close if you really think about what the ground actually looked like. But the difference was the number of organizations that were here. We hear about the New Georgia Project. We hear about Operation Black Vote. But there's other organizations. We Vote, We Win. There's an organization for Latinos, Asian Americans. So there was a huge coalition of people who are on the ground making this work. And at the end of the day, Raphael Warnock had more organizations working for him than Herschel Walker, who really took pretty much a vacation between the midterm elections and now.
So you talk about the New Georgia Project. Is this about to be the model for all sorts of states across the country?
It would be the model if every state had Stacey Abrams, but they don't. And so, you know, Stacey Abrams was one of the co-founders of the New Georgia Project. I think it's a mistake, and even the activists and organizers, Stacey Abrams herself will say this. It's a mistake to try to repeat the magic of Georgia and Texas and Mississippi. They have to find their own indigenous political heroes. They have to find organizers who are committed to not just showing up 6 weeks before Election Day, but 6 years before Election Day and setting the groundwork. People here were telling me the importance of this race is because in 6 years, the next time Raphael Warnock has to run, this will be a blue state. Georgia will become like Virginia, and that's because they've been putting in the work over the last 10 years. So that's what you have to do in South Carolina. That's what you have to do in North Carolina to make that change. It's not about one person. It's a coalition of organizations.
Jason Johnson, stay close to us in Georgia. We'll be back to you soon. I want to bring in our experts. Democratic strategist James Carville, who helped, of course, elect former President Bill Clinton in the early 90s. Juanita Tolliver, a veteran political strategist to progressive candidates and causes. And Reed Galen joins us, co-founder of the Lincoln Project. He has worked on a number of GOP campaigns, including John McCain, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and George W. Bush. And David Jolly's here, former Republican and former member of the U.S. House of Representatives. He is now chairman of the Serve America movement and an MSNBC political contributor. Mr. Carville, I turn to you first. What's your big takeaway?
Well, first of all, it was an election that we lost in November by 7, the gubernatorial race. We got wiped out statewide. We came back and won. And let me give a tip of the hat to Posters. Posters got this exactly right. And I was so gratified to see that Senator Warnock gave his political professionals a big shout out. There's a young man that people tell me is really great, Quentin Fultz is his campaign manager. And I think this shows the value of good campaigns. And I think where they really did well is in the exurban counties like Forsyth and Cherokee and Fayette. And we're learning to compete in a lot of different places and not just be an urban, overeducated party. And I thought there's some real positive takeaways here tonight from Senator Warnock's campaign and for Democrats, and I really congratulate them.
Juanita, what's your takeaway?
Look, I think Reverend Senator Warnock said it best. The people have spoken, and I think a lot of that comes into also what Jason mentioned and Representative Nikema Williams mentioned. This is about year-round organizing, multicultural organizing to be able to turn out, because what we're seeing in the counties that Senator Warnock won, he outperformed himself even from just a month ago. That shows a steady stream of work that was ready to go on the ground the moment the runoff was confirmed. But I also appreciate Senator Warnock talking about how this was, he personally defied the odds, talking about his mother's history, picking cotton, picking tobacco, to now picking her son as a senator, but also the systematic way that he has defied odds with voter suppression running rampant in the state of Georgia. SB 202 was clear and present throughout this runoff cycle and throughout this election. Remember, they cut the runoff time from 9 weeks to 4 weeks. They eliminated drop-box location, closed polling locations, purged voter rolls, did everything they could to prevent people from turning out. But through that multicultural, through that every single day effort to turn out and mobilize and engage voters, Georgia organizers, Georgia volunteers, and Georgia voters defied the odds again tonight.
David, Herschel Walker was not qualified for the position, obviously. Clearly a major outlier. Were you surprised with how close this still was?
No, and I think this is very important. Jason says that this was not a close election. I get it doesn't feel like a close election tonight when you're on the winning side. This was an exceedingly close election.
1.7 million people voted for someone who just weeks ago was talking werewolves versus vampires.
An exceedingly close election with a terrible Republican nominee. And I think sober minds in the coming weeks will say, what if there had been a different Republican nominee? In some ways, in the runoffs, you had bad nominees 2 years ago because Perdue and Loeffler were so tainted by Donald Trump. Now you have Herschel Walker. But let's frame this in the realm of opportunities. What are the opportunities for Democrats coming out of this? They did see, and you heard the Georgia State Chair mention this, coalition building. And that is different than, consider what we saw this cycle different than 2 cycles ago. Democrats weren't wrestling about who's more moderate or progressive and what's the Goldilocks temperature of ideology. It was actually about building a coalition and letting voters see themselves in that coalition. Neither party has perfected that. If Democrats continue to pursue that narrative of building a coalition where more voters can see themselves in the party, watch out. Now it won't be a close election. What about for Republicans? I am amazed tonight, Stephanie, that after a few weeks of anti-Semitism, of white supremacy, of saying we're going to shred the Constitution, and now being reminded that Donald Trump cannot pick candidates, that we have not seen the person who says, I'm going to take Republicans to the next level. Where is timid Ron DeSantis tonight? Where is meek Mike Pence tonight? Where is shy Mike Pompeo tonight? Because they are not looking to lead the party to the next step, because now's the time. We're coming off a conversation of white supremacy and hate and anti-Semitism, and terrible candidates like Herschel Walker and DeSantis and Pompeo and Pence aren't willing to step out and say, okay, we're done with this guy. What that tells me is they're just waiting for Donald Trump to die. And think about this. I mean, nobody's actually willing to say now's the time to move the Republican Party forward. That's the opportunity. And if there's a Republican with brass in the country tonight, you'll hear them on the morning shows tomorrow.
Okay, well, Reed, weigh in here, because within the last hour, Fox News' Laura Ingraham saying, I'm pissed. And she didn't say she was pissed at Donald Trump,
right,
who brought us Herschel Walker, courtesy of the Celebrity Apprentice. She's saying she's mad at the establishment GOP. The establishment GOP has been biting their tongue, quietly hating Trump for years, but never had the guts to say it.
They'll never say it out loud. It's his party. It's his party till it's not. As David said, they want him to go away, whatever that means. And I think
Well, it's a party no one wants to go to.
But you know what? But we're a 50-50 country. We talk about 51-49 as if it's a majority. It's 2 seats. But in today's America, that's a majority. Republicans have a 9-seat majority in the House. That's a big majority, right? We are a 50-50 country. Remember that if it's a little bit different weather, right? If some people decide not to stay in line in November, right? Herschel Walker could already be senator-elect. He had the benefit in November of Brian Kemp's machine to pull him along. He didn't have that this time, even though Brian Kemp, Botox Brian Kemp, I like to call him, wanted Walker. Why? Because he wants to run for president too, and he knows he needs that MAGA piece, and he had to go find some bona fides after getting in a fight with Trump.
Mr. Carvo, what do Republicans learn from this, right? If there's anything we see, it's that the country wants something practical. They don't want the extremes. But when you look at Congress, when you look at who Kevin McCarthy might be surrounding himself by in the coming weeks, that doesn't seem very practical or centrist.
Well, 2 points. First, don't nominate a couillon, which is a South Louisiana word for clown. But I want to go to something that Mr. Jolly said that I completely agree with. The Democratic Party is a party of coalitions, and coalitions have to learn to live with each other and build on the coalition, not overly emphasize one or other part of the coalition. And the Republican Party, and I'm sure Mr. Jolly would agree with me, it allowed itself to turn into a cult. Only a cult would nominate somebody like Herschel Walker, all right? A coalition is what Senator Warnock talked about. Is expanding it, and he ran all over Georgia, and he made himself accessible to all of Georgia. That's the model of how we win elections. We are part of a coalition, and everybody in the coalition has a responsibility to move the ball forward and win, because a coalition is always a better way to go than a cult. I congratulate Mr. Jolly for his offer.
Can I just add very quickly, because thank you, James. Democrats right now are just tapping the potential here. We know there's this restless, independent, disaffected voter base that has swung in the last couple elections, and it's swung towards Dems, right? It has swung away from Republicans. Democrats need to grab that and own it. And you know what? It would be a party of 60% of the country if it figures out how to do that.
And I thought it was important, too, that Senator Warnock invoked his faith, which is something that a lot of Democratic candidates don't do. Obviously, he's a pastor, so that makes sense for him. But I think that also gives maybe some white, soft Republicans who are church-going say, you know what? Maybe this is a party I can be a part of, because a lot of the party now is identified by its coastal elites, not often identified with religion. And I think the coalition piece is absolutely right. It's a large block of Democrats, enough Republicans, and just enough independents who say, I can't do it anymore. I'm just done with them.
Juanita?
But Republicans are going to learn absolutely nothing from this exercise. They are going to still fall behind Trump. He's lost them 3 elections. He's lost them plenty of Senate seats. I think it was said earlier tonight that this is the first, I guess, first-term president who didn't lose an incumbent senator since Roosevelt. Like, that's thanks to Trump. He set Republicans up for this loss. He handpicked Herschel Walker, and they cleared the field for him, falling in line behind him, as the other gentleman has said, because the GOP is a cult, and they will bow down to Trump every single time. So even though he has cost them so much, I expect them to learn absolutely nothing from this exercise.
But do they have a choice, Reed? Because even if Trump's base is shrinking, he's got a stronghold over them.
We don't have any evidence yet that his base is shrinking. We don't know. No one's running.
They're not big enough to win elections.
Well, that's right. But they are big enough to win a primary, right? And everyone's like, oh, he only needs 30%. Like, he owns well more than 30% of the Republican Party right now.
So do Republicans, right? So when we say, why don't they just dump Trump? Can they?
I don't think so. I don't think. Well, first of all, I don't think a lot of them want to.
You can't win with him, and you can't win without him. And guess what? They own this moment. All those cowards created this moment. You cannot win a national general election with Donald Trump, but a Republican nominee cannot win without his base. And so what happens if Trump runs in the primary and loses to Pompeo, Pence, or DeSantis, and then alleges fraud, and the MAGA voters stay home?
Oh, he'll make sure they stay home.
Republicans own this moment. Welcome to the wilderness. Enjoy your walk.
Whoa, Mr. Carville, what do you think?
You know, I agree with a lot of the things people are saying. This is obviously a good night for Democrats. But, you know, we got to remember, the Republicans, it's a red state. They won a governorship in November by 7. They won every statewide elected office. And we have to build our coalition. We cannot depend in the future on them nominating idiots. They may wake up and not I know that. I hope they continue to do that. But I think Jolly is right. We have a golden opportunity to build a real coalition. And I would remind people who listen to this show that the 2024 Senate map is not very good for Democrats. And we have to get on the stick, and we've got to broaden our base and broaden our appeal and campaign everywhere. I just want to make that point. But, you know, we feel good tonight. But go look at that 2024 Senate map, and it'll sober you up and reinforce the things that we're saying tonight, the necessity of building a broad-based coalition and appealing to voters all across the country.
Juanita, I see you nodding your head.
Right. When James Carville said campaign everywhere, that was the other big point that Representative Nikema Williams, who's also the chair of the Georgia Democrats, emphasized. They didn't take anything for granted. And if I'm the DSCC, if I'm head of Democrats in the Senate, I am making sure that 2024 map gets early investments, steady investments, and infrastructure developed starting tomorrow, right? This shows that with those early investments, with that long-term engagement, something can happen for Democrats. They can flip some seats. They can hold some seats that are at risk in 2024. And so that is critical. I think the other critical part is define your opponent early. Because what we have seen is Republicans put up all these low-quality candidates. Trump handpicked these low-quality candidates. I fully expect that to be the game in 2024. And so that is something that Democrats can do well if they are consistent in defining those Republican opponents and keeping their own heads. One thing Senator Warnock did extremely well is that he stayed level. He let Herschel Walker's words speak for themselves. They had ads. The last ad he put out was of voters reacting to the asinine things coming out of Herschel Walker's mouth. That is how you play across the map.
Reed, what does all of this say about Joe Biden and where he is right now? He didn't physically go to Georgia and campaign for Raphael Warnock. He apparently didn't need to. He's in Arizona talking chips manufacturing in a state, in a city, Phoenix, that actually is doing extraordinarily well from an economic perspective compared to the rest of the country.
Yeah, he's doing what he should do. He's out being a successful president, right? I mean, legislatively, politically, they understood what they needed to do on Capitol Hill with a very narrow majority. Again, with This was not President Obama in 2009 with 60 votes in the United States Senate, right? He did this also with Republican votes, which, as you mentioned over on Fox, they're just going bananas about, right? And so I think
But they're not being honest about who they're angry about.
But listen,
how are you going to really blame Ronna McDaniel
it's
for this?
24/7 lies over there, so they're never honest about anything. But that's neither here nor there. I mean, they're blaming everybody because they always blame the establishment, whoever it is. They hate McConnell, they hate McCarthy, even though they're going to use him like a rag doll, right? And so I think what you're seeing now is the opportunity for President Biden to go out there. If he wants to run for president again, which I think he probably will, nobody's going to tell him no, except for Dr. Biden would be my guess.
Okay, we're out of time, but David Jolly, I'd say you know him best. What are we going to hear from Mitch McConnell tomorrow?
So who's going to step out and blame candidates and Donald Trump? Mitch McConnell's probably your leading person. He will say candidates matter. Understand, Mitch McConnell doesn't care so much about Herschel Walker. He'd love to have the Georgia seat. He wants to twist the knife into Rick Scott. Rick Scott is Mitch McConnell's nemesis. Rick Scott had a terrible cycle as head of Senate campaigns. Mitch McConnell is going to drive the bus over Rick Scott, back it up, and drive it over him again.
I'm pretty sure he knows how to do that. We're going to leave it there. James Carville, Juanita Tolliver, Reed Galen, David Jolly, thank you all. Coming up, Jen Psaki, Simone Sanders-Townsend are here on Raphael Warnock's win and what it means for Democrats in D.C. right now. Senate Democrats were hoping for a 51-49 majority, and they've got it. NBC News projects Raphael Warnock won tonight's Senate runoff in Georgia. So let's bring in former White House press secretary and MSNBC host Jen Psaki and Simone Sanders-Townsend, former chief spokesperson for Vice President Harris and host of the show Simone on MSNBC and Peacock. Let's talk about tonight. Senator Warnock said the people have spoken. You've been speaking to people in Georgia, not just today, tonight, but for weeks. What's your takeaway?
Yeah, we had a Peacock special in Georgia. One of the takeaways is that Reverend Warnock built a very vast coalition, a coalition that was supported by the infrastructure that Stacey Abrams worked to create in that state over a decade.
Isn't that sad for Stacey Abrams? Stacey Abrams built this house, and she doesn't get to live in it.
Someone recently described her to me as Moses. Look, I think, unfortunately, it's a story. I said this right after the general election. This is a story that Black women know all too well. Sometimes you do not get to reap the benefits of you directly, of the work that you have put in. But because of the work that Stacey Abrams has done, Georgia is competitive. I don't believe it's purple. I think it is, light red, it's pink. But Georgia is competitive because of the work that Stacey Abrams did. In 2021, a lot of Georgians saw themselves in the election of a young Jewish millennial, John Ossoff, and a Black pastor, two sons of Georgia, one who pastors Ebenezer Baptist Church, who was just reelected for a full term tonight. So I think the coalition piece is important here and what this means for electoral politics going forward.
51-49. Explain to us what this means, why it's so different. I mean, Kyrsten Sinema, a lot less powerful tonight than she was yesterday, but beyond that.
Yeah, look, there's a huge difference between 50 and 51, in part because of committees. Because committees with the 50-50 split are split 50-50, depending on, whatever the numbers are. And this means that Democrats will have the majority in committees. That means they can push through judges on the Judiciary Committee. That means they can push through nominees in other areas. It also means they can push policy votes to the floor more quickly. Now, maybe that doesn't mean you're getting a major piece of legislation passed, but it does mean they can make Republicans vote on tough things. And I'm sure they will do that, too.
Let's talk about that, because we often hear, well, listen, Republicans still have the House. They're not going to get anything done. Not all Republicans in Congress are hardcore MAGA Republicans.
No, I mean, the hardcore MAGA Republican candidates were roundly rejected in this most recent midterm election. The margin in the House is small. Maybe I'm just an optimist, Jen. I don't know. But I do think that there are going to be Republicans that are willing to play ball with Democrats in the House, Democrats in the Senate, and the White House on key pieces of legislation. They got elected in purple places, in purple districts, where folks want to see things getting done. They do not want to see their elected officials spending time on oversight hearings that don't mean anything, that aren't substantive, and are a very affront to the Constitution and the founders that these Republicans in Congress say that they revere. playing games with the Constitution and games with the Republic. No. So I do think that this is going to be I think people should buckle up. It's going to be a very interesting ride, but I do believe that some things are going to be able to get done. It's not going to be easy, but this is a different House, a different dynamic than we've seen in a very long time going into 2023.
Joe Biden coined himself the bipartisan president, and he's already gotten quite a bit done from a policy perspective. What do you see in the months ahead?
I think you have to wait and see. I hope this is the case.
I'm optimistic, Jill.
It is also true that, you know, and Simone and I were talking about this a few minutes ago, that for these Republicans who are vulnerable, they can't just go full Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like, that's just not going to work for them to get reelected. So they are going to have to find a few things. There were more than 80 bills, bipartisan bills, that passed in the first year of the Biden presidency.
Hey, I want you to look in the camera and say that one more time.
There
People
were
don't
more
realize
than
it.
80 bills, bipartisan bills, passed in the first year of the Biden presidency. They were things that made people's lives better. It is possible that that sort of thing can happen. Will it be the big one with huge bill signings at the White House? Maybe not, but that's okay.
The infrastructure bill was bipartisan.
That's true.
People forget that.
But even if it's not that big, they are still things that can make people's lives better. And if you can find the majority of votes, that's just what you need to get things done.
I mean, and on this point, I've heard a lot tonight. Folks also cited this idea about judges, and then now judges can get confirmed more quickly. The Biden administration was confirming judges. Okay, this president has put more black women on the federal bench than any president in history. And given nowadays, everything has a legal angle. People are just running to the courts, to federal courts and appeals courts, to run into the Supreme Court to elevate something, to get something done. And so it's very, very important that the courts are representative of the depth and breadth of the American people, and people who are sitting on those federal seats are people who have experience.
But somewhere Ron Klain is highlighting a list of judges and more people to get through, because it does
He's sending an email right now.
He's sending emails because it does make it easier to move them more quickly through the Judiciary Committee. That means Republicans cannot play procedural games and delay it. And they did, as Simone said, get a record number of judges through. And now they can get even more. And that is a bench that Democrats have not always been good at building.
Okay, stay on that, because Ron Klain might have his highlighter out tonight, and he might be marking it all night long.
We can make him digital.
What he doesn't have, though, is the Federalist Society, which Republicans have been building over decades. And to your point, Democrats have kind of been slow in figuring out how important this is, and judges are on the bench for life.
Well, so here's where I disagree, because the Federalist Society is actually dictating who Republicans should nominate and get confirmed. What Democrats have been doing, and there are a number of good judicial groups out there, Democratic groups, Demand Justice does amazing work. There are a lot of good ones who have been really researching, vetting, and building slates of diverse candidates, and not just diverse in kind of demographics, but diverse in terms of their experience. And that's important to have representation on judicial benches as well.
Yeah, people who are public defenders, not just prosecutors.
Yeah, exactly.
There's one
Not
other
just
point.
ghost hunters
Not
or
just
people
ghost
who've
hunters,
never actually
werewolves,
practiced law.
Werewolves or
One other point that I think this White House is looking at least the vice president's office. Now, with 51 senators, Vice President Kamala Harris is no longer the tie-breaking vote on everything. That frees up her schedule.
She can go on travel.
Oh, my goodness.
She doesn't have to be handcuffed to the Hill.
Honey, I remember when I worked at the White House, and it was like, okay, what is the Senate vote? Where can we go? She can't go on this day. Senate in session this day. This changes things for the vice president and the work that her team is doing.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be watching. Thank you so much, Simone Sanders-Townsend, Jen Psaki. We're going to actually let you go to sleep. They have been here covering this all day and into
Good
the early
election
hours.
night.
There you go. When we come back, Georgia voters broke records deciding the very last Senate election of the midterms, the issues that got them to the polls, when our special late-night election edition of the 11th Hour continues.
Just because people endured long lines that wrapped around buildings, some blocks long, just because they endured the rain and the cold and all kinds of tricks in order to vote, doesn't mean that voter suppression does not exist. It simply means that you, the people, have decided that your voices will not be silenced.
This edge of your seat Senate election in Georgia has been a learning opportunity for campaigns in both parties. We're happy to have Monica Simpson with us, Executive Director for the Sister Song Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective. Kendra Scott joins us, CEO of the New Georgia Project Action Fund, and political strategist and ace election forecaster Rachel Bitecofer. She almost perfectly predicted the 2018 blue wave. I want to talk policy, ladies. Monica, let's start with abortion. Democrats wanted to make this a big issue in the Senate race. Was that a good strategy? Who came out?
Absolutely. This was an issue that no one could ignore. When we had the Dobbs decision that was just so traumatic to so many people, this issue was something that any candidate who was looking to move into any political office had to make sure that they were addressing. And it became a huge issue for everyone on the ground. What is real for people in Georgia and all across this country, we know that abortion access is something that people need, that they deserve. And so it was really important for everybody who was coming out during this political season to really center this, because our bodily autonomy, our ability to make our own decisions about our family creation, about our rights, our bodies, is something that is fundamental to the liberation work and the social justice work and the political work that we are also committed to.
Kendra, the New Georgia Project has spent years mobilizing, activating voters. What did you see as the top issues driving people to the polls?
I mean, in addition to reproductive health, as has already been, in reproductive justice has been mentioned, voters want, expanded health care. Voters want affordable, housing. Voters want, an increased living wage. And all of these things were on the ballot. People were proud of the fact, and we saw real tangible benefits from that 2021 runoff and the 2020 election when we got Joe Biden to the presidency. What folks realized was, the student loan forgiveness, the public service loan forgiveness program, the debt relief that we've received with student loans, all of those things are real things, tangible things that we could point to on the doors. What we know here at the New Georgia Project is that our voters are very sophisticated and they vote on policies. And so what we do is we connect the dots, we take those hard issues and we teach people how to be super voters. It's not ever about a particular candidate, it is about the policies that people want to see over the long term. And that's what this long-term relational organizing is about. Campaigns come and go. We're going to be here 365 regardless, teaching people the importance of voting and reconnecting them to the electoral process.
We often hear that people get motivated to vote because they're angry, because they're left out, because they want something different. Rachel, in many instances tonight, were people voting for Raphael Warnock because he's delivering, because they are doing well, right? If you look at the economy in Georgia, in many cases, it's doing better than other parts of the country. Think about the Port of Savannah, the city of Atlanta. It's extraordinary the success they've had. So are a lot of people voting because they're saying, this is going well for me and I want more of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's incumbent on campaigns and candidates to convey that message, and I think the Warnock campaign is pretty ace in that regard. I do think it's necessary but not sufficient. I think the two ladies that are on this meeting with me are really as pivotal. The on-the-ground organizing that's happened in the state of Georgia over the course of the last half decade it's just really does provide that framework for a strong and successful statewide candidacy. So I wouldn't want to take anything away from that organizing, but ultimately I think that message component of Warnock is jobs not mobs, right? And that's ultimately what the message was. It's about delivering for people versus lawbreakers and sham investigations. And you could hear that on the stump. I mean, every time I heard a voter on the stump say, "Hey, I'm voting because I'm afraid about democracy. I'm afraid for my bodily autonomy. I feel threatened." Right? I understood that was also a component part, and that we really need to acknowledge, I think, that there is to some degree a backlash effect happening in states like Georgia, where you're seeing political realignment of some long-term GOP voting blocks, especially white college-educated voters, joining this coalition of Democrats and coalitional Democratic, traditional supporters, and it really does provide, I think, a really bright opportunity in the Sun Belt across Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, Texas, and Arizona, and other states.
Kendra, one of the night's sort of biggest stories is the even deeper divide between blue urban and ruby red rural Georgia. Just how divided is the state now? Because truthfully, when you talk to both of those people, they're all just looking to take care of their families. They want a good job. They want health care. They want good schools, yet they don't see eye to eye on almost anything.
Well, I agree with that. I do want to make sure folks understand that there are a lot of black and brown folks in those ruby red counties, and we reach out to those folks every day. And those folks, we poll those folks, we talk to them, and you're absolutely right. People do want the same thing, and there is a political divide. I think that urban-rural divide is always going to kind of be there, but I want to be clear in this moment that rural is not synonymous with white. And I think across the country, a lot of people make that assumption. There are a lot of Latino voters that live down in South Georgia. There are a lot of black voters that live out in South Georgia. And those folks are showing up and showing out, and they want real results. What is happening that you're seeing is a result of extreme gerrymandering in our state. While I agree that, yes, there's some coalition in this runoff because Herschel Walker was such an unqualified candidate, I want every one of the viewers to understand here that Georgia, inside these 159 counties outside of the federal election, is ruby red itself because of gerrymandering. We don't have one state constitutional officer that is not a Republican. Both chambers of our state legislature are controlled by the Republican Party. So yes, we have these wins federally, but we have a lot of work to do, which is why continued investment in these organizing and grassroots apparati is critical if we want to continue to move the needle towards progress in this state.
Do you feel like you can move the needle in those counties that are so very gerrymandered?
I think we can. Let me be clear. I am a person who was gerrymandered. I was recently gerrymandered into Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. So I am living this reality in Cobb County, Georgia right now. And I still have a smile on my face. We are still fighting the good fight because there are people out here that believe, again, it takes that 365 a year, day a year, relational organizing to build trust in these communities so that people are get out. We can out-organize bad policy. We shouldn't have to, but we have proven ourselves time and time again when people have thrown us away and left us for dead. The South has something to say, and I think tonight everyone has seen it. This is not a fluke. Georgia, the demographics have shifted. We are resolved to make a difference in this state, and we intend to spread our knowledge across the rest of the region. When you hear people make these little quips about, oh, just let them secede, that's crap, man. We're down here and we're working hard and we're excited about what's going on. And kudos to all of the organizers who have been out on the ground working hard for this victory tonight.
All right, I know I'm out of time, but Monica, I have to ask you before we go, yet again, how important were black women voters tonight?
Black women voters continue to be the driving demographic that continue to push the needle, that continue to save our democracy. Black women were so incredibly important to this vote. Black women continue to show up across all of these issues, from voting rights to reproductive justice to economic security, because we truly understand what this means not only for us personally, but for our communities and for our families. And so if we just continue to trust Black women in this country, then we will continue to get wins like we got in Georgia tonight. And I'm excited about the energy that Black women bring to this democratic process, to democracy, because we continue to show up over and over again in this country, and we continue to lead this country in terms of progressive values.
Raphael Warnock's mother once picked other people's tobacco, and tonight she picked her son to be a senator of the state of Georgia. Monica Simpson, Kendra Cotton, and Rachel Butikofer, thank you all for joining us tonight. When we come back, it has been a very tough day for Donald Trump, not just on the political front, but on the legal one. Barbara McQuaid is here on what the former president and his businesses are up against. Donald Trump's legal problems are stacking up yet again. A New York jury found his company guilty of tax fraud. Special counsel Jack Smith subpoenaed local officials in swing states for their communications involving Trump. And the January 6th committee said it expects to make criminal referrals to the Justice Department. So let's break it down and bring in Barbara McQuaid, a veteran federal prosecutor and former U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan. Barb, let's talk about what this means for the Trump organization, because it was a week ago we heard the news that Trump penned a huge real estate deal with a Saudi Arabian real estate developer for a $4 billion project in Oman. Does this conviction put all that at risk?
It does, not necessarily, but I think that anytime you've got a conviction for a felony by a corporate entity, there is some concern. You know, oftentimes whenever there's a deal, a loan that is secured by a company, there are often clauses, you know, that say that things can trigger changes in those terms, like a criminal conviction. So it could be that an entity like Saudi Arabia or anyone else could call a loan as a result of it. And he faces the company a fine of $1.6 million, probably not a huge price tag in light of all of the other kinds of transactions that the Trump organization does. But the reputational harm that a criminal conviction does puts all kinds of other things at jeopardy, like loans, like business deals.
I don't know, $1.6 million sounds like pennies. Jared and Ivanka made $600 million while they were working in the White House, and he's now running $2 billion of MBS's money. Talk to us about Jack Smith's subpoenas. How big a deal are they?
You know, it strikes me as interesting in a couple of regards. One is Jack Smith is wasting no time. The date on these things was November 22nd, which is within days of his appointment as special counsel. Subpoenas requesting communications records from clerks' offices in 3 of these swing states where there were fake electors. So could be really revealing, really interesting to see if there are any of those kinds of records between those counties and Donald Trump or others. But the other thing it says to me is, how could they not have asked for this already? How is it that here we are almost 2 years after January 6th, and they're just now asking for these? I mean, you can only imagine the conversation Jack Smith had with them when he said, where are all the communications records between Trump and all these clerks' offices? And the group saying, what? No, we haven't asked for those yet. You haven't what? Well, let's get those right away. So, both it says that he's working hard and looking for important things, but also perhaps some gaps that have existed in the investigation to date.
Was he asking, or perhaps was he screaming? What are you expecting with these possible criminal referrals from the January 6th committee? We heard they could be coming, but we don't know to whom.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. There was even a question as to whether these would be for perjury, and I think Chairman Thompson said, we'll have to wait and see what they are for. So hard to speculate before then, but, you have to really take Liz Cheney at her word when she said that she thought the committee had produced evidence of conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruction of an official proceeding. And if you think about all the people in that cast of characters, hard to imagine it would not include Donald Trump and John Eastman, Jeffrey Clark, some of the other people who were part of that plot to try to subvert the election. So we'll wait and see, but I would imagine it includes at least those 3, if not others.
All right, adding to the long list of hardcore Trumpers who do not want to open their mouths, Michael Flynn has now been ordered to testify to the Georgia grand jury, the one investigating Trump's election interference. We know what they want to learn, but let's be honest, it's Michael Flynn. What are they really going to get?
Well, maybe not too much, Stephanie, but it's really important for Fani Willis to talk to anybody who might have been involved in these efforts, because you want to lock in their story now. It may be that he doesn't tell you much. It may be he truthfully can't tell you much. But what you really don't want to happen is you charge a case now, and then by the time the case comes to trial a year from now, Mike Flynn strolls in and he's got some big story about how it's all a big mistake. So you want to find that out now, and putting him in the grand jury is the way to do that.
All right, Barbara McQuaid, thank you very much. And for you at home, thanks for watching. I wish you a good night, and based on the time of day it is, a good morning. From all of our colleagues across the networks of NBC News, thanks for staying up extra late with us. I will see you at the end of today, basically. See you later.